Don't be like everyone. Everyone thinks money's the biggest barrier to getting into real estate development, when in fact it's not even in the top 2. And the people who figure that out, they find their deals within months. If you're sitting on the sidelines because you think you need $500,000 to start developing, keep on watching. If you think the only way to develop is with your own cash, this video will change how you see any deal going forward. I'm Josephine and I help fix and flippers move into real estate development. I'm a German immigrant who came to the US with nothing. When I first got into development, I didn't have personal credit or a network. In fact, my whole family still lives in Germany, but I had millions in construction loans. I run a development firm in Nashville and I coach people across 12 states on how to do this. And the number one thing that I hear from people who haven't started yet is, I don't have the money. I've been on hundreds of calls with aspiring developers, and literally every single one thinks that what keeps them from doing their first development deal is the money, but that is actually not fact. The very first thing that keeps you from doing your first deal is just not knowing the process. You're lacking the skill set. How could you do your first deal if you just don't even know where to start? And the second thing that keeps you from doing your first deal is not having the right mentor, not knowing who to talk to when you have questions. And only then, number 3 is the money. But guess what? When you figure out 1 and 2, the money will flow. You don't even run into problem number 3. Because once you have the skill set, you're able to find a deal. And with that, you'll be able to find the money. It always starts with knowing the process, finding a deal, and then finding the money. So if you're serious about doing your first development, you actually got the objection ranking backwards. Let's talk about how deals actually get funded. As you probably know by now, there are many different ways about going to find a deal. You can drive for dollars, write down the addresses. If you see dilapidated houses or vacant lots, those are great property owners to call and see if they're willing to sell to you. You can connect with wholesalers, realtors, you name it. You can even do direct marketing and send mailers to data lists like tired landlords or any kind of tax deficiencies or high equity property owners. There's so many different ways to market for a deal. But it's important that you understand your buy box. If you don't know your buy box, meaning what to go after, then it's very difficult for you to obviously get to a deal, right? So that's really all about knowing the process. But once you have your marketing down, people know what you're looking for, then deals will come to you, right? We're speaking of inbound deal flow. And you just need to know how to underwrite those. Once you know how to underwrite those and you're actually able to go for a sample deal, well, then you take that deal to potential lenders and funding partners, right? So keep in mind that when you are negotiating, especially with direct to seller leads, you can negotiate your lot value, your acquisition of that property so far down that you are ending up with lot equity. That is the best way to get started because now you have equity already built into the lot. And that way, when you're doing your pro forma, so when you're running the numbers, right, then you actually can include that and you don't have to bring less equity to the table, meaning like less cash up front. So there are ways of starting deals where you don't even need any kind of cash injection. And we've done those as well many, many times. But what is really important for you to know is that once you have that deal, you can go after asset-backed financing. Means that you don't even have to have tax returns. It's not going to be underwritten based on you and your financial strength. It's just going to be underwritten based on the deal. Or you can also just bring other investors along. And that's what I help people with as well, because that's how I started. So you're going to raise the capital from private investors. They're going to fund the down payment that is needed with the lender, as well as the interest carry and any other carry. Now, you always want to make sure you have enough margin. And I actually also encourage you to find ways to bake the interest into the loan so that you don't have to pay this out of pocket every month. It's really important that you don't have monthly payments if you can absolutely avoid it. And everything I'm sharing here is based on you developing that skill set, right? So how do you develop the skill set? Well, you're already here on YouTube watching videos, and I applaud you for doing that. So everything is figure outable here on YouTube. But if you want to fast track your results, you decide to work with a coach, whether that is myself or someone else, who can help you fast track your results based on their experience, right? We've gone through trial and error, learning the hard way, paying our dues. And so now, obviously, we know the cheat code of how to do things faster and also more protected. I'll share with you of how I did my very first deal. I ended up pairing two investors together to come up with $350,000, so $175,000 apiece. And ultimately, they brought the down payment, including some reserves, and then we got bank financing for the rest. So at the time, we weren't really bankable. My US credit history wasn't even long enough, and we didn't have enough reserves. So what we ended up doing is that my former business partner and I, we had one of the investors co-sign for us, and then he got paid a little bit extra. That is a creative way of getting started. You can do a deal without any capital of your own. Again, you can bring in lot equity just by negotiating the property at a discount. You can bring in bank financing and other people's money through private investors. There is a huge difference between having money and having access to capital. And as a developer, you don't need the first, you need the second. You need to know how to access capital. But in order to do so, you really have to know your stuff. You really have to know your skill set. And then with that, you can bring in other people. When you're doing these type of deals, you want to make sure that you protect the deal, yourself, and also the investors. Again, things can go south. And we have seen a lot of deals and a lot of different structures. And over the years, I've learned what works better and what doesn't. Also, how to handle investor communication when things get rocky. It is very important that you know how to communicate about your project at any given point in time with your investors so that your investors have also the confidence in you coming through for them. Now that we know what the barriers to getting started really are and how you can get started in getting your first deal, let's talk about what the cost of inaction is, because I think people don't quantify that enough to actually understand what that procrastination costs them. Let's just say you're flipping about 5 to 8 properties a year. Maybe you're at 10, good for you. And you're making $30,000 to $50,000 per flip. So what is that? We're making anywhere from maybe $340,000 to, let's just say, $600,000 a year. Well, that is on the higher end of experienced flippers. But even then, you're managing a bunch of properties. You're hopping all over town. You're not really making this in just one spot, right? So we only take on development deals, new construction deals, or land development deals. We're making at least about $100,000 per unit. Otherwise, it's just not even worth it. So for paper math, it is about $100,000 per unit that we're looking at. And keep in mind, there are multiple ways of making money as a developer, and we have another video that is going to break that down for you, and you can find here in the channel. The question is, what does it really cost you by not moving up into a new construction, whether it's land development or building ground up? The cost is you losing out month over month from the money that you could have made. It's the cost of you being laser focused on crafting a skill set to do more volume in one place. As I said before, we're not taking on a deal unless we're making about $100,000 per unit on paper. So now think you doing a 4-unit or 5-6 unit type development. Maybe you do have 2 projects going, which is actually what one of our members, Reggie, did last year. He started acquiring 2 pretty much back to back and now is stacking deals, where that allows you now to make more money in 1 or 2 locations versus 5 to 10 locations. And the difference is that instead of making $30,000 to $40,000, $50,000 on a flip, you're making now more plannable $100,000 per unit. So if you're doing a duplex or a quadplex, whatnot, you're already looking at $200,000 to $400,000 just given one project. And that is the biggest difference. So if you invest in yourself, let's just say $10K to learn the skill set, well, now you're having a 10x return just based on developing 1 unit, right? But not only are you making 10x return on that, you're also now increasing your income just based on where you're at currently flipping. You're actually taking off your ceiling, your income cap. Right now with flips, you pretty much have a cap, whether you know it or not. You are only able to take on so many flips on any given point in time, and it's just not as scalable. When you're looking at new construction or land development, you get a blank canvas, and so it is a whole lot more plannable, and the project is rinse repeatable, versus you looking at flips where every single flip is different just based on floor plan, location, etc., etc. One of our members, I've worked with him now for quite some time, Wright, he's made $1 million by working with me over the last 5 years. And so for him, it's a 100x return on working with me because he has learned and now mastered a skill set. He's actually scaling his operations. And so you want to get into that position where you're able to also prep deals and then sell them. And that can be you. You just need to make sure that you're putting yourself in a room where you're actually able to learn the skill set. Chris likes to say the cost of something you can make back 10 times. Another member, Lissette, said, anything that you invest in yourself, you'll get back. I think it's fair to say that Lissette saw the investment in the skill set as a down payment on a new identity. And I think that's a good way to look at it, because at the end of the day, you're able to change your life by mastering a skill set. And that skill set, I mean, everybody knows that some of the richest people in the country are rich because they've learned real estate development, is going to yield you and afford you a different identity, a different lifestyle. Not only can one development deal replace 5 to 10 flips. So I'm asking you, what would it mean to you if on your next deal you're making $200,000 versus $40,000? And that's not a fantasy. That is not a fantasy. That is the math of development versus flipping. I already talked a little bit about the identity shift and what it takes to step into that identity. So I want you to understand that I can't raise money is a belief and not a fact. People say I can't raise money, but what they're really saying is they can see themselves as someone who walks into a room and presents a deal. That is not a money problem. That is an identity problem. I remember Mario recently started his first development project, and in the very beginning, he wasn't sure of how he was going to come up with the money. But when he learned the skill set, then he found a deal, and with the deal, he found also a lender that was able to help him get funded. And he didn't have capital raising experience, but he had the process down, which allowed him to find a deal, and then the money followed. When you have a solid deal and a plan of how you're going to execute the deal, then the money is going to find you. So I need you to understand you're not begging for someone to fund your deal. You're presenting them with an opportunity to invest alongside you. So Mario's reframe was that as a developer, you have more control, and with that, you're reducing risk. Investors want to fund control risk, and development is exactly that when you do it right. Nobody teaches you this. They teach you to wholesale, buy fix and flips, invest in rental. Nobody sits you down and says the developer controls the deal. But here's how you need to think about it. Everyone else, the lender, the contractor, the vendors, they're all working within your structure. So you're the one that is actually in charge and in control. When you understand that, the money conversation changes completely. Here's what people who stay stuck actually do. They Google themselves through and they're never going to execute. They're just basically seeking more information on information, but there's just no execution. Do you know that that is actually more expensive than you just simply deciding to invest in yourself to learn something? Spending 3 years watching free content and never closing a deal, that is actually not free education. That is in fact the most expensive education that you can possibly get because you pay with your time. So many people invest in college education and spend tens of thousands of dollars and then walk out without being able to execute and not even having a business model. You don't want to do that. Now, in today's times, you're able to get yourself into a room for $10,000, $20,000 and actually walk out with a business model. And that is the difference. And that is really what you want to invest in. Over the last few years, I probably spent over $150,000, $200,000 in just education myself. Every time I decided to invest in myself, I knew that I'm going to have exponential return because it is an investment in myself and it's up to me of what I do with that skill set. It was a decision of investing to make my skill set better and to add tools to my toolbox. And that's what allows me to grow much faster than a lot of people because I understand the process of growing my skill sets and growing myself by investing in myself. Otherwise, I know that I'm going to pay with my time, and my time is so valuable that if I don't, or if I'm not willing to invest in my skill set, that it's going to take me longer on my own to figure it out. And if I go that route of going trials and error, which I'd done in the very beginning until I realized it didn't work, and I'm just paying more and it's more expensive, Another thing that has a lot of people stuck is the flip trap. They're doing 5 to 10 flips, flip after flip, thinking they're building something, when in reality, the ceiling doesn't move. You're running faster, but on the same treadmill. Earlier this year, I was helping a member who had just joined, and she was already under contract, and she knew she had made a mistake on her budget, and she said it gave her so much stress. But I'm not surprised, because she tried to do it on her own, and it's very, very difficult when you're doing something new to do it on your own, rather than having the support, feeling peace, and knowing that someone's also watching and guiding you. Often the expensive mistake isn't the deal, it's just doing it alone. You might be watching this video and still have a W-2 working a 9 to 5 and be thinking, how do I even get to work on my own? Well, our member Reggie went through that identity shift, realizing that he had put all his drive, effort, skills into making someone else rich, his company. Once he realized that all it took was this identity shift, he went from working at Microsoft within 6 months working on his first development project. And it's just because he realized that I can take all my drive, my time, my hustle to work for myself instead of making someone else richer. He's been building his own pipeline, and that's been giving him so much more freedom. If money was the real barrier, most active developers would have not started their first deal. Every single developer I know started without having it all figured out. They had the right process and the right people around them. And that's it. If this shifted something in you, please drop a comment down below. We love feedback. And also, I'm curious what's been holding you back to start your first deal. If you want my step-by-step process to move from flipping into development, I built a free developer roadmap. The link is in the description below.